Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for staying with us despite the coldness of this hall, although for a short while it went off, but it came back a little bit moderated probably. So we have this session 3 now for about 1 hour and 15 minutes. And we have a very distinguished panel of speakers. And the topic is ASEAN digital transformation, increasing the connectivity to drive economic growth. I think throughout the forum last night, leading to this morning and this afternoon, we looked at the ASEAN as being central to certain geographical positioning, not to mention the geopolitical tensions that is now globally affecting everyone. So given that contextual position for ASEAN as the epicentrum of growth, there are traditional areas for growth and transforming areas for growth. And of course, the digital technology comes into play a very, very, very important role. I said it 3 times, the word very, because this is really going to do what we call a game changer. This is the expectations that we have, but on whether we are able to absorb this transformation, the digital technology transformation, is yet to be seen. But during the last 3 years, the COVID has been able to give us some what we call a headwind push that made us all move into, but now we come ourselves to adjust to the environment and see transformation, and digital transformation is going to be an enabler. There were some aspects that were mentioned, whether this is going to take over humanity, and AI is going to affect us very much. I, for one, believe that HI, what is this, HI? I just say HI refers to human intelligence. And we have the experts on the human intelligence, 3 on my left, on your right, and 3 on the right, who are going to address some aspects of this. So with that opening remarks, I would like to ask one by one in the order which has been given and following the tradition that has been set in the 2 other panels. George Chemel, co-founder and chair of the Huawei IQI Holding Malaysia. It doesn't look like a Malaysian. No, sometimes you'll find that those who come to the ASEAN context, whether Malaysian or Indonesian, they perform better than our own people, and George is one of them. So over to you, George.
Thank you so much, and I'm really honored to be singled out as in this room. So I've worked in the ASEAN region for 13 years in the digital space, and in the early days, the industry was so small and it was kind of a separate industry that we ended up working together. ASEAN and I worked together in 2 companies already. And now it's grown so much, and what we've heard earlier from the minister, as well as yesterday from the governor, we now have a new breed of politicians who don't refer to their assistants for technological help, but they lead the technological transformation. 20 million Instagram followers is actually something I'm really, really jealous. I have about 500. But so what, I mean, I was blessed, honestly, moving up here to this region, not just because I got married to a Malaysian woman, obviously, that's the most important bit, but also because I got exposure to a lot of transformational businesses. These businesses at that stage, 2 of them were listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. And whenever I go to Australia and talk about Southeast Asia, you know, I always come with great enthusiasm and lots of positivity and say, look, this is the third largest region when it comes to employment, the 5th largest GDP region, etc., 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 and say, okay, when I talk to fund managers and others, say, so what are you focused on in your investments? And they say, well, we focus on emerging markets. And say, what do you mean by that? They say, China and India. I said, okay, and is there a bit of money left for Southeast Asia? And they say, well, we have 40-50% for India, 40-50% for China, and maybe 10% for other emerging markets. I said, okay, so China for you is an emerging market. Then they say, yeah, and the other emerging markets like South Korea. And I said, okay, really an emerging market? What about Southeast Asia? They say, yeah, it's difficult. Too many countries, so difficult. That's the perspective from like Schroders and a few other banks from the outside, and make it sometimes a bit harder to raise capital, because that's the only thing which is missing, because the human capital is there, the ideas are there, the openness and the positivity towards technology is there, but the financial capital sometimes is lacking. But there's positive news. Players like the Bursa and so on have really rejuvenated themselves and are shooting up. So over time, the whole focus shifts to more the local stock exchanges to raise capital. And it's being discovered also by overseas people to invest more into ASEAN stocks as well. So that's a great positive, which will drive the growth in the future, because let's face it, I mean, if we talk about a region with diverse countries, I mean, the European Union is another classic example, and that's far more diverse, and there's constantly conflicts on all different corners. At least every decade there's a major conflict within the EU. So from that perspective, I think this is a very peaceful, this is a very fast-growing area with a lot of potential. And the potential for me in this area is players who first and foremost focus on being the regional leader within ASEAN, because ASEAN by itself is very large. Yes, there are also global players within our in our region, but initially it's really those regional, the Grabs of this world, the SEAs of this world, the Carsams of this world, Traveloka, and there is more and more and more. And with the young population, with the young in the mind population, also in terms of technology, I'm very hopeful and excited about it. Now, what do technology companies need from government, from others? I think it's actually certain regulations, so we don't like run into the wrong direction and cause too much damage. But on the other side, a bit freedom. There's a few rules which make it really hard. For me, if there's one thing I would ask for getting rid of is this withholding tax. Whenever you buy something from overseas, you have to pay extra tax, and nobody else in the world really has. It's very dominant here, and it's kind of a tax which Google and other players should pay, but you end up paying it. And the other thing is really access to more talent, having slightly easier rules of getting people in, because everybody who comes in will spend money, will create jobs, and so on and so forth. So we're living in an exciting region. We have an amazing platform. We have the right spirit, and there's a lot of great players. So as you might have picked it, I'm quite enthusiastic about the region.
Thank you very much, George. I think you put the perspective, I would say, in the right direction. Digital was small to begin with, and its impact is becoming overpowering right at this moment. And how does governments react to this, and what sort of a help is required or to be given by the governments? If we are able to take a comparison, when manufacturing and industrialization was taking place, and these were the prerogative of the West. And they said that we are bringing this to your countries, and there is always the countries like ASEAN were begging for technology. And in your agreements, you will say the transfer of technology is an important element. But now we do not see the same thing happening in the digital side. The digital side is overwhelming. Whether you beg or you don't beg, it is right at your doorstep. So with that kind of a situation taking place, perhaps Chem Sriwat, who is the director for the Center for Inclusive Digital Economy. When we talk about the digital transformation, it is going to be embracing the entire economy. And how do you see this in the future?
Very good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to be on this panel today with our distinguished panelists. And I would just like to briefly share some of my perspectives from the think tank, public sector, private sector, and academia perspectives on digital transformation. So I think that nowadays, digital transformation, everyone hears about it. Wherever we go, people want to go digital, but there's a common misconception. We focus too much on the first word, which is digital, but we forget about the second word, which is transformation. And for me, as a technology enthusiast, an AI enthusiast, I think that it's more important to focus on the part of transformation. And really, digital transformation is not just about technology, but it's about change, right? So it's about a change in mindset, which will lead eventually to a change in behavior. Based on some of my different experiences, I would say that the three main pillars of digital transformation are, number one, culture, number two, the workforce, and finally, number three comes technology. So really it starts with culture. I think that maybe all of our panelists here from different sectors and industries can agree that it starts with a kind of culture that we have to build, that not everyone has to be an IT expert or an IT professional to contribute towards the digital transformation of an organization or a country, but really it comes from different angles and different kinds of contributions. And so the second would be workforce. So this refers to the overall, let's say, capacity and skills. I think what is very much overlooked is the type of skills that are required for digital transformation. Of course, technical skills are very important, but equally are the soft skills and just the brief understanding of how to apply technology, digital technologies in those contexts. And finally, number three comes the technology itself. And I think just to build on that, based on our, let's say, extensive research that we've done, helping to consult on the National Digital Technology Transformation Roadmap for Cambodia, we came up with three suggestions during our conclusion. That was the first being to appoint transformational leaders. So on that first point, I think we can observe and see around the world that many of the top technology leaders in all sectors, not all of them come from a technical background or an IT background. Some of them come from business, arts, philosophy, history, you name it. And with that, it just shows that to be a transformational leader, you have to be innovative, risk-taking. Not that you have to understand how every single process works, but at least in which direction you should be going towards and how to bring a team together. That brings me to my second point, is to invest in digital human capital. Again, digital human capital meaning not only focusing on your IT department, but also beyond that, the management of digital technology, how business and technology is interlinked, and especially when it comes to having your technical team ready to push digital transformation. I've seen many times that some organizations only have limited resources. And with those limited resources, for example, they have, let's say, 5 or 6 people in their IT department. Those individuals are all tasked to lead digital transformation, which is what everyone wants to do at the end of the day, but 80% of the time is spent on fixing the internet, fixing the printer, setting up Zoom meetings, and all those very necessary but tedious tasks that don't allow them to develop further. And finally, the third point would be to invest in digital infrastructure. So I would say that this is the end point, which proves to be a very large obstacle, where most organizations or countries, they kind of stop there and pause and say that, oh, because we don't have enough financial resources, we don't have the available budget or funding, we can't really carry out digital transformation because it's very costly. In my opinion, I think digital transformation requires an investment, right? It's not just a cost. Furthermore, there can be different levels. I think transformation is about change, and there can be, let's say, a level 1, a level 2, a level 3. You know, at the most basic level, infrastructure could include mobile devices. It could include even free software that is available on the internet that everyone can access, but we invest our time to try something new. And then at the higher levels, for those organizations or countries that are more capable, you know, investing in higher level digital infrastructure could include servers, data centers, and so on. So that's just my brief point. And I think in conclusion, I would say that any individual, organization, or country is capable of digital transformation. And the worst thing would to be doing nothing at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sriwat. Yes, I think you touched on some aspects of the impact on humans, particularly when you mentioned about the mindset for the change that is to come as a result of this digital transformation. It is not the transformation per se, but be able to accept the changes that is going to come in. Now, very interesting to see what you have said from your research on the business and the private sector. The impact is also very, very dominant at home or even at school now. The schools are all going digital. And while they are looking at some aspects of how to bring the global perspective in education to the classroom, but the classrooms have not been enabled. I think this is one weakness that we find in many countries, especially in our region and so on. Yes, the digital human capital, how do you develop this? Because training these people in order to do this capability is not going to be easy. And although you mentioned about the IT department, I think the IT department is going to be becoming an obsolete, because every one person in the organization will have to be IT competent and accept the digital and be able to work on with that. That's great. Now we move on to our third speaker, Johannes Lukiman. He is the chair of the Permanent Committee for Asia Pacific Indonesia, Chamber of Commerce, Kadin. And we had Arshad Rajdi, his president, giving us at the opening remarks this morning. And he is also the head of the CEO office of the Business Development Blibi Ticket Group. So can we ask Johannes?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on the topics. I wanted to pick up on a few things that the fellow August panelists have brought up before me. I think on anticipating the digital divide and trying to reduce it, this is something that we really focused on in the B20 that we led as Indonesia's chairmanship last year in 2022. And during the formulation of our policy paper on digital transformation, on digitalization, we actually picked up on one of the key phrases that Dato Iqbal mentioned, which is mindset. And we advocated that the G20 government should focus on preparing people for a digital ready mindset. What does that mean? So we divide education into 3 levels, right? Elementary, primary, and tertiary, secondary, so forth. So for each level, there should be expected outcomes. So for children, you should teach them what you see is no longer the truth. With DAL-E now, you can create virtual images which look so realistic. Even seeing video might not really reflect that something has really happened, right? And then on a secondary level, you need to teach them that, hey, some of these things that you're being taught now are actually being done by machines as well, but you still need to have this basic core knowledge in order to be able to do something when those machines break down. But then on a tertiary level, you need to be prepared to construct the business. So you might be able to be learning accounting 101, but then you need to learn, how does digital ledger figure into this? How would a cloud-based centralized accounting system help me build my business instead of me doing this with pen and paper? So at every stage, a digital ready mindset needs to be built. And then we need to reform as well in order to reduce the digital divide, how we view education over the lifetime of a person. It doesn't end at the tertiary stage, because very often those most at risk of being left behind in digital transformation are those who are mature professionals. And so we need to make sure that the education system accommodates reskilling, upskilling, and addition of digital skills where it's needed. And I hope that that policy recommendation, which will be measured across all G20 countries, will be implemented as fully as possible. But I also wanted to speak about one of the topics that was mentioned today about integration across ASEAN in a digital sense, and business integration more specifically. Chairman Arshad has made the theme of epicenter of growth very clear, but also his own motto of no man left behind. We know that there's a huge informal economy in the ASEAN nations. And we also know that these informal economy participants cannot be paid by digital means, conventionally anyway. So this ASEAN QR code program that we are pushing from ABAC and also with the ASEAN finance ministers and central bank governors will be a game changer in digital economy connectivity. And I'll share with you some use cases which I believe will be transformative. An Indonesian tourist can go to Pattaya and buy fruits from a roadside vendor using his Indonesian e-wallet, Indonesian source of funds, use a QRIS compliant e-wallet, but scan a Thai-based QR code, all done in real time, domestic currency settlement, and also no fee leakage to global card schemes. So what does this mean? Immediately, we are saying to MSMEs, people in the informal economy, you adopt this QR code, you'll be able to participate in intra-ASEAN tourism benefits. And so this QR code we really believe will be a transformational tool. And yesterday it was said a lot of people in ASEAN actually, I think it was for you, Pat, said they don't really care about ASEAN. They're asking themselves, what is the benefit of being a citizen of ASEAN versus the benefit of being an Indonesian citizen? This is going to be something that changes the day-to-day reality of citizens all across the ASEAN region. When you can receive payments via QR code and you can pay for almost anything with QR code, then they're going to say, finally ASEAN is delivering something for me as an individual citizen. But then if we bring it up a level to MSMEs, we're talking about marketplace lending on an ASEAN level. And more specifically, we're saying that in Indonesia right now, we've got peer-to-peer lenders who can fund MSME loans, but only accept Indonesian funds. We should change that. We should allow any MSME within ASEAN to be funded by any investor within ASEAN. So we're not going to change who is doing the lending, but we can change where the funds for that lending is coming from, therefore expanding the risk appetites available, expanding also the risk profiles of the lenders across ASEAN, and also giving more information and transparency to people who are looking for different types of investment. We believe that by widening the possible funding base and introducing more possible fundable projects into MSME lending platforms, that these people who need funding the most, because the corporates can take care of themselves, will be able to benefit from this. And I think the last element of our ABAC chairmanship digital transformation program, Wiki Entrepreneur, is again something we are rolling over from B20 and G20. What does Wiki Entrepreneur mean? It means people-to-people connections, facilitated in a digital environment, and we also introduce a funding element to that. The pilot project is between Indonesia and Japan, where we have Indonesian smallholder farmers, artisanal producers, handicrafts producers, and so forth, meeting off-takers from Japan on a platform where there's live translation, which is enhanced continuously, because one of the main language barriers is language. We have a little accident there. And then once those connections have been made, and once the broad outlines of commercial agreement have been achieved, the funding element will be there. Because corporate funders or banking institutions will be much more comfortable knowing that there's an off-taker with financial capability involved in the equation of this trade. So representing ABAC here and on the topic of digital transformation, and also speaking as a practitioner, because Blibli is one of the largest digital ecosystems in Indonesia, I think that the future is very bright, but education needs to happen early. Education doesn't start once someone has graduated from high school or university, and that we continuously need to be looking at the ASEAN policy level for use cases that will be impactful. Because very often, sometimes we spend time at the ASEAN policymaking level on solutions in search of a problem, put it that way. And I think QR code is much more practical, and I'm glad that this is indicative of the direction of ASEAN going forward. So I'll hand it back to you, Dr. Sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan, sir. It was good. Two aspects come very clear from your presentation. One is that there is a requirement for what is known as digital literacy is not going to be prescribed in the organizations, any one particular department, or even in the population, any one segment. It has to be right across the board, from early childhood to wherever you go in your education system, because it is like reading and writing. Now we no need to do any writing also, because I think we forget how to write. We do the typing. I remember secretaries, you have to pass typewriting and shorthand. I think all these have become obsolete. And now everyone is using a typewriter on your phone or on your computer or on your tablet. And of course now the voice messaging, transcribing onto that, it is coming into fashion. So the digital literacy is going to be a basic, what we call an educational tool available for everyone. Now, the second point that you brought out, and then you are in the Blibli ticket group, very large ticket group, travel and tourism. Now, earlier in the connectivity, we talked about bringing down the ticket price and travel to be enabled so that people can move. And even people from the kampung level, they can go on to. Azran would be able to later take on this point, is that I think one of our airlines start introducing this without any counter service. Straight away you go into the machine in order to register and get your boarding ticket, and then also your checked-in baggage and so on. The queue was getting so long, and then they didn't know what to do. And if your population is now going more and more into the travel, and as you rightly pointed out, Johannes, people trying to use the e-wallet and so on, so you have to prepare the population, and this is the adult population. The younger people probably, they will take on this when they have the digital literacy taken right from the start level. So we move on to Dr. Henry Goh, co-founder and group chief operating officer of Macro Kiosk. He is a startup and he has done tremendously on this digital area, and perhaps he would be able to share with us some of the experiences and also how he conceived and then transformed and then moving on to higher levels. Dato Henry?
All right, thank you, Dato Sri, and very good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name is Henry. Just to share a little bit my company, I run a company, or I co-founded a company called Macro Kiosk 23 years ago, so it's not sure whether it's still a startup, but generally it started off as a startup anyway. We are currently operating in 12 different countries across the region, but in the ASEAN context, we are operating in all countries in ASEAN, except Laos and Cambodia, which we are exploring for this year. So over the past 23 years, our company's objective and mission is to actually build technologies and solutions and services to help companies of all sizes, organizations of all sizes, and even I would say countries of all sizes to go from non-digital to digitalization in the prospect. Something they've done 23 years ago, so I think it is in a way, it's kind of a journey that quite difficult, I would say, especially in ASEAN context. But nevertheless, for the past 2-3 years, as we talk about COVID, it has provided the tailwind in terms of how our company has transformed and also how our customers from multiple different countries accepting our solutions quicker and easier. However, of course, for the past many years, as we have grown our company and also operate in many of these ASEAN countries in the perspective, I do see that each of the countries has progressed. Each of the country would also like to do what we call digital transformation, especially with the onset of COVID previously. However, obviously, there are also a lot of issues and challenges. For example, if you are selling to a customer in Singapore, it's very much different from selling to a customer in Myanmar, for example. Both wishes to have digitalization, but both wants to have a different objective of digitalization. For example, in Singapore, they are talking about using digitalization to speed up work and to reduce headcount, for example. Whereas in countries like Myanmar, their digitalization is only about trying to making themselves more high-tech, but without actually reducing headcounts. So I think the objective of digitalization seems to be different for different countries in ASEAN. And I think the key difficulty then comes to a point at what we're talking about, digital inclusiveness. Digital inclusiveness or digital divide in the sense, in ASEAN is still really getting huge. Some countries want it a different way, another one want it. Not just about talking about within a country where we have T20 or super digital experts and those that are lack digital experts. Even country to country in ASEAN is really huge gap in that perspective. One of the things that we do also see is that, say for example, with the onset of Industrial Revolution 4.0, so many countries are implementing that. But however, again, countries like Singapore or even Malaysia in the context, we are trying to use IR 4.0 in a sense of, especially in terms of increasing automation. But the bad part of increasing automation is really then reducing headcounts. So in that sense, countries like Malaysia and Singapore with a smaller population, we probably make sense. But then if you were to implement, Industrial Revolution 4.0 in countries that's larger, in that sense, will then resulting in in a reduction in headcount, which then again is not so good for the country, simply because countries need more jobs, right? I think this is an area of divide. It's not just a divide in terms of technology or digital knowledge, but then a divide in terms of the needs of the culture, the needs of the community, and the needs of individual countries in that perspective itself. Obviously, you know, I could also say is that these divides are the one that ASEAN as a whole should look at how we can work together and to close this divide in terms of from country to country, simply because the different country needs, simply also because different countries' richness and capability, rich and advanced countries. And to be honest, I look at it even so many years now as we develop, we can see that while digitalization enables everyone to learn things quicker, but actually the divide between countries, even in ASEAN, is getting actually larger. The rich ones are getting richer, and actually the emerging ones are still very much chasing up the richer countries, despite digitalization is something that should close this gap together. So what I can see is that some of the areas that should improve really is that, for example, my Prime Minister, Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, was talking about the idea of the Asian Development Bank. I think it's really an idea that should also be in the context of ASEAN Development Bank, where then we can look into this context of how we can address every country's different needs in terms of infrastructure, in terms, I say, Lukiman was talking about education. I think the most important part is also about funding. The thing is that a lot of ASEAN countries now are looking into countries like Japan or China or the US to come and invest and try to help us to close this gap. But I think if ASEAN itself, we were to have our own development bank, looking at different country needs and to then develop different countries' requirements, I think it will be a more cohesive environment for us to grow as a team, where I believe countries coming from other regions is not so well versed or probably not able to even serve the purpose of what ASEAN is trying to achieve. So that's what I'd like to share today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry. Dr. Henry Goh, as he rightly pointed out, he started 23 years ago. That was the early or the pioneering period of this digital economy and opportunities available within that spectrum. And he has done extremely well, 12 years. What the most important point that he brought out is, if you are talking about growth, and then we are talking about digitalization or digital transformation as an enabler of growth, that itself has got an industrial component, but it is an enabler for the other segments and other sectors in the economy. And therefore, each country has got its own priorities, even when you bring in the digital transformation. Because when we talk about digital from the workers' point of view and worker union point of view and the labor movement's point of view, there is always the fear. How many jobs are going to be lost as a result of this digital transformation? That is why governments are very, very sensitive to adopting policies too quick, where there will be disruption of the employment opportunities. Of course, the counter argument will say digital transformation itself will bring in new jobs and higher skills and therefore higher pay and so on. We do not want to get into that controversy. Now, moving on to our next speaker is Professor Major Dr. Chin Yu Sin, Advisor for Asia Pacific Region, Global One Belt, One Road, the BRI, I suppose, Belt Road Initiative Association. He's all over the place, and you know that last night, if you looked at him, coming one after another, it is like in the Olympics, you collect the medals. So he is our champion, and probably he would be able to give us some perspective of what is happening in the Asia Pacific region on this digital transformation and how it provides growth to the economy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sri, for your introduction. I will talk about this topic from different perspectives. First thing I would like to highlight is that this ASEAN Connectivity 2025. So how to achieve that? Before coming to that, I will outline some historical perspective of this industry development. Everybody know that this the first industrial revolution was driven by this steam engine. Then the second industrial revolution was driven by petrol. At the time petrol was widely used already. The third industrial revolution was also driven by this petrol. What about this fourth industrial revolution? It was not driven by any energy. It is being driven by digital technologies. That's what we are using now. And this ASEAN is talking about this digital connectivity in 2025. So how to achieve that? Before coming to that, we look at some of the figures, what ASEAN is having now. In 2015, ASEAN is forecast for its digital economy to achieve a total amount of this 200 billion USD. And its e-commerce is forecasted to achieve 88 billion during the time of 2015, another 2 more years. So, according to some report, this ASEAN can be one of the world's top 5 digital economies in the world in 2025. If ASEAN is really cooperating with each other and implement whatever outline in this ASEAN digital connectivity 2025, it can add 1 trillion USD in another 10 years. So by that time, ASEAN could be one of the top digital economies in the world. So and some of the research done by this company, ASEAN economy now is about 7% of the GDP. I mean, the digital economy is about 7% of GDP. And this China is achieving 16% of its. I mean, the digital economy is occupy about 16% of China's GDP. So, in fact, ASEAN want to achieve digital, connectivity more successfully. ASEAN need to learn from China because China, in less than this year, China is celebrating 45 years of reform and opening. So China was opened in 1978. Why China within 45 years it can become world number 2 economy? I think in 2028 the fastest or latest by 2031 China can become the world number 1 economic power. Looking at the trend, I think it can be achieved. It's a matter of time, whether it's sooner or later only. So ASEAN can learn a lot of things from China because China, the key success factor for China to achieve so fast growth based on 2 factors only. First thing, physical infrastructure. Second thing, digital infrastructure. So China built a lot of physical infrastructure through this One Belt One Road. So now China is trying to help other developing countries through this One Belt One Road initiative. So second thing is China also very successful in using digital technologies to really go and sort of solve resolve their poverty problem. Because China, as you know, is a huge country. There are so many underdeveloped areas. If not because of this digital technology, China can never eradicate 800 million people out of poverty in less than 50 years. I think China is the only country in the world who don't have absolute poverty at this moment. So I think ASEAN country really want to sort of be able to develop faster. They need to sort of learn from China in terms of build more physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure. But ASEAN countries, there are 11 countries now, plus this Timor-Leste. So the development stages of each country is very different. For this Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and this Singapore, all these Indonesia, they are considered more advanced countries. Other countries like CLM, what is CLM? CLM is Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. Their developments is not so, so good as compared with these 5 countries. So that's why ASEAN take time to really go and coordinate, their digital connectivity. Because look at this, coverage. There are 5 things we have to consider when you want to achieve a good infrastructure, digital infrastructure. First thing you have to look at the coverage. How wide the area it can be covered through this internet facility. Singapore is 81% full coverage, almost full coverage. But you talk about Laos, only about 22%. So the disparity between countries and within countries is very, very wide. So this sort of thing, you need to close the gap, the coverage. And talk about this, another thing is the speed of internet connectivity. This is very important because how fast you can do your things, how efficient, it depends on how fast you can download, any information from the internet, or how fast you can do the things. So the speed also one problem. Singapore is 15 to 16 times faster than Myanmar. So that's why it's not what I call it's not uniform. In terms of speed. And the third thing is the factor need to consider is the affordability. That means how much money these poor countries can afford to pay for these internet facilities. This affordability also very important. They will affect this ASEAN digital connectivity in 2025. So this one you have to make it more. The cost has to be has to lower down its cost so that more people can access to internet facilities. The fourth thing is the content. That means the content is very important. What is internet content? Then we can attract people to go to use the internet. If the content is not interesting, nobody will access to it. So that means the content is very important. So that to make more people they are really interested to access to internet. First thing you have to get people to access to internet, they only can think about other things, not about business benefit. First thing you cannot draw people to use the internet, just like Malay proverb say, tak kenal maka tak cinta. You don't know, then you don't really love it or like it, you see. So that's why the first thing you have to make it more interesting, attractive, so that people is attracted to use the facility. The fifth thing, I keep on looking at me, the time is not very there. The fifth thing is, I forgot the thing already, you look like me. The fifth thing is, the fifth factor is the security, is cyber security. Luckily, my memory is still full. Cyber security, that means how when you use the internet to transfer your payment, is it secure or not? Is it reliable? This is very important. So that's why the cyber security is very important. In order for ASEAN to achieve ASEAN Connectivity 2025, these 5 factors must be really looked into it. So if not, then ASEAN it cannot be what I call so advanced in this what I call digital economy. So because in future to come, because now consider digital economy already. So before digital economy is what? What sort of economy? It's a knowledge economy. So nowadays it's called the digital economy. So everything you must think in terms of digital technologies. Just like I say, fourth industrial revolution is driven by digital technology. So whether you like it or not, the future we have to rely on these digital technologies in order for the country to advance further. You look at China, you can see how fast they can advance themselves. I mean, China not only economically, military-wise, technologically wise, everything, one day they will become number one, not only economic. So because they really make full use of technology to really go and make their country advance further. So this is a thing that ASEAN also, you really need to rely on technology in order for ASEAN to be more developed. Because ASEAN now is among the what calls the top, the 6th largest economy in the world. That one is not digital economy, it's the 6th largest in terms of GDP, it's number 6 in the world. So ASEAN wants to become number 5, what called economic body in the world. They really have to make use of these digital technologies. I think my time is up already.
Okay, okay. I think you knew the time was up a long time ago.
Because I look at you, you look at me, I know.
No, but it's just on a lighter vein. I think Dr. Chin brought out the essence of e-commerce. I think throughout the morning we talked about this trade and cross-border trade and how remittances will take place east for multi-currency transactions and so on. And this is going to be the in thing. And of course, how governments look at it and reduce the obstacles as much as possible in order to facilitate that. And now with this currency war and currency problems, this is not going to be easy because there is no ASEAN currency or any common currency in which to transact. And if it is the US currency, that is also now in a very disputed area of what they call de-dollarization. We leave that polemics aside, but Dr. Chin brought out the good elements of China in terms of the digital transformation. You need not have to look at far and out into many other countries. Right across the China Sea, you have China providing some of these. And of course, when you start using even TikTok, that becomes sensitive because it leads to data breach and secrecy and security risk and all that. We do not understand very much of this, but people are very fearing, whether it is in Europe or in the US, they are fearing. So it has got the negative aspects. You brought out the elements of cybersecurity. On the one hand, yesterday I did mention about China on the one side and India on the other side. China is very rapidly advanced in the digital transformation, and India is providing the competency skills for the rest of the world, and therefore they are able to provide. So we have got these two neighbors who can provide us with this competency within the ASEAN. So thank you very much, Dr. Chin. And then it will not be right for me to say Azran is the last speaker, because Azran being A, we should have given him the priority of starting with the A. But nevertheless, I'll give you 2 minutes extra from what Dr. Chin. So over to you. Yeah, Azran. Okay, Azran.
Thank you, Iqbal. Dr. Sri Iqbal did not save the best for last. The if I were to look back at the last 28 years of my career, the clarion call of the ASEAN opportunity, the theme of ASEAN centrality and connectivity has run very, very deep. I've been so excited. I've tried to build a number of ASEAN businesses across a wide range of industries, from heavily regulated and capital intensive businesses like aviation, to broadcasting, media and technology, and now in healthcare and specifically digital mental health. What I've learned is ASEAN is really, really hard. It is so hard, so difficult, so frustrating that I've pulled out all my hair and I don't have any left. So you're one step ahead of me on that front. You've sort of figured out how to save a little bit going there. But if I were to think of all the big challenges, it's not the regulatory environment or foreign ownership rules and market entry requirements, as much as it can be painful. Nor is it the issue of cross-ASEAN, cross-border talent, and even though it is a big theme, I'm extremely passionate about it, and nor do I think it is infrastructure, digital infrastructure specifically. A lot of these things can be solved if we can kind of unlock digital capital. So if there's one thing I want to share today, to build on what Georg said right at the start, it's the ASEAN opportunity fundamentally is limited by smart digital capital. The challenge, as Georg mentioned, is for a lot of the international investors, when they look at ASEAN, you're right, they think this is too high friction, too low yield compared to China and India, and so we're usually given a pass. Even for the investors who are looking at ASEAN, the first thing they'll ask is, are you in VIP? Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines? Because there's a subclass of impact investment funds who are looking for sort of that large domestic market opportunities. So for those of us who are not in VIP, there is that added challenge to that, right? And besides that, when you look at countries like Malaysia and Thailand and you mentioned CLM, a lot of them do not have sufficient smart capital providers and smart capital allocators, but not only just allocating capital, but looking at it from a distributed portfolio point of view, who are willing to make bets to catalyze innovation. Malaysia, for example, today is still stock primarily driven by public sector funding, right? Which is extremely conservative. It is a lot easier for me to raise money in Germany and New York and Vancouver than it is for me to raise money in Malaysia. Or even in Thailand, where the primary main source of capital have been corporate venture funding. But a lot of the mindset is we either want to do it ourselves or we're going to acquire it very early on, right? So that kind of growth capital is missing completely. So I think the short answer is, my title should not be entrepreneur; it should be professional beggar, because as an entrepreneur, 80% of my time is begging for funding. And if I look back, interestingly, while I might say, okay, in the last 12 rounds over the last 15 years, we probably would have reached $1 billion. But raising $115 million in 2007 or 300 in 2013 was a lot easier, not easy, but easier compared to raising 1.2 million during the 2020 COVID pandemic. So timing, frankly, is everything. The people that we meet, because capital is still very people driven, which is why the sad opportunity till today is, part of the reason why I don't think we have answers is we continue to only deprive the audience of conferences like this because we're only putting in half our gender representation on panels like this. We don't have enough of the smarter gender representation who perhaps would have answers. But the capital being allocated, it's still driven by relationships, and that's a very, very limiting factor. So I think if there's one challenge that I'd like to put on this table, is how do you unlock smart capital allocators across ASEAN? Because it's not about learning from China. It is not just about having better infrastructure, because if you don't have smart capital, nothing matters.
Thank you. I think we are almost there for the closing time of our panel session, but we started a bit late. So taking the cue from all the 6 speakers and the points that have been raised, is there any burning question or clarifications that the audience might have? Especially when Azran was talking about the smarter gender, is there any person from that gender wanting to make a little bit smarter in this comment? Everybody is looking at Dr. Jessie. No, don't worry. She is more an agronomist and in the plantation industry rather than in the digital transformation area. If there are none, I think we will just go around very quickly. I don't want to ask names. Anybody with your burning comments that you have seen that you want to, 1 minute each.
I'll keep it very brief. I completely agree what you've said, and I give a live example. I'm involved in a HR platform from the onboarding, recruiting, all the way to payroll and so on. So one of the leaders, or the best technology and leader in Malaysia, is valued at, I mean, it's embarrassing, it's about $12 million, versus the leader in Germany, who doesn't do anything different, is valued at a few billion euros even. And this just shows you the massive difference. And this leader is in Indonesia and is in Singapore and is expanding. But I'm hopeful that there's more money coming, and also people get smarter, because as Dato Sri Iqbal said, it's not just about how much you spend, but how you spend it also. So smarter money. As Asia Partners said it in 2019, there's a golden age for Southeast Asia digital coming, and now they're saying it's Southeast Asia's moment.
Good. Any others? Say what?
Yeah, thank you. Just to sum up, I think there were very interesting perspectives from our panelists here. Again, I think it really comes down to the mindset, right? Because different countries or organizations are at different stages, and so we have to take that into consideration. It's not a, let's say, race or competition, but really carefully allocating in terms of resources, both human and financial. Thank you.
Anybody else? Johan?
Since this is the leadership forum and leaders are supposed to be able to have a crystal ball and look into the future, I think we mentioned a few things about STEM skills and, you know, being your IT support / also digital transformation expert. But if we look into the not so far future, things like ChatGPT will become commoditized, right? So if you look at their capabilities now, arithmetic, it's in the 100th percentile, it's elite level. If you look at legal document analysis, ChatGPT is great, but there are some things it is terrible at. Being creative. Creative writing, it is in double digits slow, and then when you give it a creative programming challenge, it very often fails. So we shouldn't lose track of the fact that we have a cultural component in ASEAN which we need to preserve. And I think that going into the future, we need to, yes, talk about digital transformation all the time, but not lose the essence of what it makes us human. So people shouldn't be too scared about digital transformation. It will happen anyway. Let's make sure that we keep part of this human element and person-to-person connections, because that's what really is going to help economic transformation across the region, people to people, not AI to AI. Thank you. That's
All right. Azran?
Just to
Yeah,
sum up
okay,
as well, I think we talk about China a lot just now, which is good from Doctor just now. I think we can learn a lot from China, but I think might not entirely suitable for ASEAN in context because we're multiple countries. But I think one thing that we should learn from China in the sense that Chinese do believe China a lot. They believe in the sense of what China can achieve. I think one part that among all that we talk about, I think for ASEAN to do well is also about ASEAN believing that now is the time of ASEAN. Means we should believe in ourselves. In the retrospective, for example, would Singaporeans buy Malaysian products and would Malaysians buy Indonesian products, for example, or would we actually start to prioritize other countries, other regions' products? First, I think that itself, when we start to believe ourselves more and we try to believe ASEAN is the next region of the century, I think that should help us to grow quite quickly as well. Thank you.
Azwan?
I'm going to leave you with an acronym, THINK. T for taking control. What can we control versus what we can't? H for hopeful outlook, to visualize, as Henry said, the opportunity. I is to take informed actions, to respond rather than react. N is to nurture the soul, the culture, and K, knowing our goals, defining the specific goals of 2025. So I'm going to leave you with that.
Okay, if I don't ask Dr. Chin to stay, I will be into trouble.
You give me the last, I can talk longer, better for me. Okay, in order for this ASEAN to be digitally connected, certain things have to look into it. First thing is the rules and regulation, because different countries got different rules and regulation regarding the e-payment. Luckily, yesterday, the ASEAN head of governments, they already decided on try to streamline this e-payment system. This is very good, because right now different countries got different systems. So very difficult for this. Because for this e-commerce, three things we have to really look into it. First thing is the flow of data with trust. How much you trust the data? The data flow across ASEAN countries. So you must have credibility and reliability. The flows of data are very important. Second thing, logistics, very important. Because for e-commerce to be successful, without good logistics support, you cannot do anything. Because you can order the thing, later on you still need logistics company to send the goods over to your customer. Without good support of logistics system, e-commerce cannot be successful. You look at China, Alibaba itself cannot be successful if not with this one company called the very famous the express delivery company No, called the I can't remember Feng Sun Feng. This ASEAN also must have this kind of logistic company in order for ASEAN e-commerce to be very successful. Third thing is the cash flow. Cash flow is regarding to the e-payment. So this yesterday the head of government had really tried to resolve this problem. Another thing also, the privacy data protection. In ASEAN countries, certain countries they still don't have. In Brunei, they still don't have. Thailand only start to look into it. And just like the Cambodia, Laos, and this Myanmar don't have this data protection, private data protection. Only Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia, these few countries, 4 or 5 countries they have. 4 countries have this private data protection. Because without Private Data Protection Act in the country, the free flow of data cannot be implemented. See? So that's why ASEAN countries still take time to really look into all these things before they can be digitally connected in 2025. Not wrong, okay?
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, in closing, I just have to admit one thing. When Tan Sri Michael and Dato' Wei, they wanted to switch the first panel session, the ASEAN Connectivity, where I was supposed to moderate according to the original program, and they said, can I do it because Dato' Wei had to go? I had a bit of a misgiving, because my knowledge in digital transformation or digital technology is not even at the kindergarten level. because when at home we have got some problem with our digital, I have to get my grandson, who is 9 years old, he is doing at standard 4 coding. I don't understand what is coding. This is what I talked about, the digital literacy. These kids are brilliant kids. They are just taking, because the school makes it a point. This is not a normal school he is going to. This is an international school. But the national schools are still on the same old mode. So there has to be a transformation in the education system. So I have to give credit to myself that this session, I think I handled it quite, not too bad, huh? Not too bad. Okay, thank you very much. Over to you, Woon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sri. Thank you so much for taking.